Let me level with you here. Predicting where XRP or any crypto lands, I've got nothing. Zero clue. But do I think we're eventually pushing higher? Absolutely. Take the clock out of the equation and yeah, we're going up. Now here's the real question everyone's wrestling with. Is this cycle taking us to new heights, or are we staring down a bear market? My stance hasn't budged. Bear market? Nah, not buying it. Here's the deal though. I might be totally off here. These words could come back to haunt me. And honestly, I'm cool with that risk. Nobody bats 1,000 in this game. If I whiff on something this major, whatever, I'll survive. But check this out. It's not some binary right or wrong thing. A bunch of puzzle pieces would need to fall differently before I'd reconsider my position. It's really not about being correct or incorrect. I'm tracking certain dominoes that haven't fallen yet. When they do fall, sure, that's when my opinion shifts. Price dumping way harder than current levels won't do it alone. Not gonna happen. We'd need legitimate market developments unfolding before I'd completely reverse course. If those developments actually occur, then yeah, I'm flipping. I'm not married to bullishness forever. You feel me? What I care about is aligning with reality. If everything screams we're sliding into bear territory, I want that truth, even when it hurts to hear. I want that truth. But we're not there yet. Specific conditions still need to materialize. So yeah, my money's still on better days coming. That's my read. And honestly, as more time ticks by, Raoul Pal's whole thesis keeps making more sense. Global liquidity is just operating on a longer timeline now because debt refinancing stretched from that 4-year cycle post-2008 to 5 years. You know what? That actually clicks. Macro isn't some background noise. It's driving the bus. So if Raoul's interpretation holds water, then yeah, it completely explains why he, Julian Biddle, and the tech dev folks are pointing toward a potential cycle peak somewhere around mid-2026. And look, this isn't one of those things are different now moments. It's literally the opposite. Things are playing out like they always have. The underlying machinery that built that 4-year pattern, still humming along. That machinery is the key, not some arbitrary digit. 4 is a number, who cares? The 4-year time frame itself means nothing. What built that 4-year structure originally, those are the gears that matter. Those same gears are still turning. We've just expanded to 5 years now, if Raoul's reading this correctly. We'll find out soon enough. XRP's parked at $1.92. Bitcoin's chilling at $84,570. Last 24 hours, basically flat. But pull back to the last few days, ouch, we've taken some serious hits. XRP's shed almost 15% this week. Bitcoin's lost about 12% over that same period. Not exactly fun to watch, but here's the thing. Everything's bleeding together. There's nothing uniquely broken about XRP here. Let me hammer this home. This sell-off has absolutely zero to do with what's actually happening with XRP fundamentally, which is genuinely stronger than it's ever been. XRP's foundation is bulletproof right now. It's just reality. When markets move, they move as a pack. Always have, always will. Chart analyst Cryptolica dropped this post. Really compelling analysis here. He's examining XRP through the lens of market value to realized value ratio, MVRV. That's what's highlighted on the chart. Basically, this tracks how much unrealized profit the typical XRP holder has stacked up. The pattern throughout history goes like this. When this thing explodes into stratospheric territory, markets are dangerously overheated, and you're flirting with a major peak. That's the warning sign. It jumps right off the page. Scan left on your screen. During that 2017 to early 2018 XRP explosion, MVRV launched well past 10. Caught that? Now flip to recent action. Despite the rally we witnessed in 2024 and all the chaos we've navigated in 2025, MVRV hasn't sniffed those alarm bell territories. What's more, each pullback has pushed this indicator down further. Translation, holders keep adjusting their entry points downward. There's no euphoric profit-taking frenzy happening. Looking through a historical lens, this indicator is basically shouting that we're miles away from anything resembling the conditions that have previously flagged an actual cycle peak for XRP. Same story in 2021, never materialized there either. Which actually makes perfect sense when you connect the dots. The SEC launched that ridiculous lawsuit against Ripple, effectively waging war on XRP holders across the planet. So naturally, we got robbed of that euphoric climax moment. XRP never even scratched a fresh all-time high during the previous cycle. Totally logical. But if you're hunting for what typical behavior looks like, yeah, our sample size is small, but there's your model. Go back to 2017 and 2018. Did 2025 replicate that pattern? Not even close. Truth is, even that all-time high, which I'm highlighting with my cursor here, happened in July 2025, and the energy around it was significantly more subdued than the hype train rolling through late 2024. We're nowhere close to exhibiting the classic red flags that appear when cycles wrap up. This is another puzzle piece, and I plan to continuously share these findings as time keeps ticking. I'll keep presenting the evidence because it relentlessly builds, and the overwhelming portion of it indicates we're not at the end game. That's how I interpret the landscape. And look, if my analysis misses the mark, then it misses the mark. That doesn't eliminate the possibility of steeper drops, though. We might wobble around aimlessly for weeks, potentially months, maybe even longer. But check this out. That would actually make total sense. That kind of movement would just bolster Raoul Pal's complete argument about shadowing global liquidity cycles. If we're treading water for an extended stretch, even if multiple months elapse or whatever duration it takes before upward action resumes, that doesn't instantly qualify as bear market conditions. The whole debate centers on how you're framing bear market. That's precisely why I observe countless people fundamentally having completely different discussions. When they're locked in arguments over bear market territory or not, have you ever truly stopped to define what constitutes a crypto bear market? Survey a dozen different analysts and you'll collect a dozen varying benchmarks, right? Okay, so let me show you this post from chart analyst CW. This is genuinely mind-blowing stuff, and if you're holding XRP, this should have you feeling pretty confident right now. The moment you glance at this chart, one thing just dominates your entire view. Green dots scattered all over the place. And what do those green dots represent? Massive whale transactions. Here's what the analysis says. XRP spot trading is dominated by large whales. Currently, the market is in buying dominant phase. Whales are accumulating XRP. Now, let me break down the color coding for you. Red represents your average retail investor making smaller trades. Yellow would be your mid-tier participants sitting in that middle ground, right? But green is where the giants play. Those are enormous whale movements. And when you compare them to retail activity, retail is practically invisible on this chart. What you're looking at here is proof that the heavy lifting in spot markets right now is coming from institutional-sized players, not everyday traders like you and me. And the guy's not making this up. This is raw, verifiable information. Where's it coming from? CryptoQuant. This isn't some random website that popped up last Tuesday claiming they understand blockchain data. CryptoQuant has earned credibility in this space, and their data collection methods are thorough and reliable. There's another chart he shared too. Let me bring that one up for you. This second visual shows XRP Ledger Spot Taker CVD, a cumulative volume delta 90-day. What you're seeing here is the market sitting firmly in taker buy dominant territory. Notice those green bars stacking up, particularly when you scan toward the right edge of the chart. That's our current position. What this translates to is simple. Aggressive buy orders are crushing sell orders in volume right now. Here's what really matters though. These whales are clearly the ones creating all that buying pressure. They're actively stepping into the market and eating up every bit of supply they can find. And if you know anything about whale behavior, you know they don't play games. Whales represent smart money, and smart money doesn't end up holding the bag. Let me be clear about something. Whales aren't out here catching knife-edge bottoms with surgical precision. But here's what they definitely aren't doing. Getting fooled. If the timing wasn't roughly appropriate for deploying capital, they'd just stay out. Period. They wouldn't touch it. Now here's where people get confused. Whale accumulation doesn't equal fireworks tomorrow. That's a rookie assumption. Price doesn't suddenly explode just because whales showed up. Rarely happens that way. Most of this activity is happening through OTC deals, which means it's bypassing the public order books entirely. No dramatic candles, no chaos. What we're witnessing looks like your standard mid-cycle positioning strategy. Deep pockets are silently building positions while the broader sentiment remains pretty grim and negative. All right, pay attention to when these whales are actually active. If you roll back to around mid-2024, right in this zone where I'm hovering, notice something? Whales absolutely flooding the buy side here. Fast forward from there, what do we get? That insane parabolic move in November. Just straight vertical momentum. But here's the interesting part. Whales went completely silent. Buying activity dropped to nothing. Then January rolls around and we tag that local top. XRP finally punched through to a fresh all-time high around $3.35. So who's chasing price up at those levels? Definitely not whales. But watch the behavior when price reverses. See them creeping back in as things start declining? They grounded out for 6 full months after that. You tracking this? Half a year of patient accumulation, then price momentum returns and whale activity starts fading out progressively. Price rallies all the way up to the peak, and at the very top, whale participation vanishes completely. Catching this pattern? So what comes next? Right here, price drops hard. Who immediately shows back up? Bingo! Whales have been aggressively absorbing every dip on the way down. Check out this data trail. See what I'm pointing at? These are just facts pulled straight from the blockchain. So what's driving this behavior pattern? They're convinced price is going substantially higher and this market cycle still has legs. That's the calculation. That's exactly what's informing their strategy right here. Look, this is pure data we're staring at right now. So if you're asking yourself whether this whole thing is over, whether we've seen the top, nobody's got a guaranteed answer to that. If this call turns out wrong, I'm not going to hide from it. I'll come back and say, yeah, I misjudged this one. We move forward and learn. That's always a possibility. I miss predictions sometimes. Everyone does. But here's what I keep coming back to. What evidence am I supposed to be looking at that screams bear market? I'm tracking countless analysts daily, absorbing mountains of information. And when you factor in the macro environment we're operating in, the weight of evidence tilts heavily against us being in bear territory. What keeps jumping out at me instead is classic mid-cycle pullback behavior. That's the story this data keeps telling over and over. Chart Nerd comes in with this perspective. XRP sitting right on its 20-month EMA. Holding or losing this moving average has generally signaled direction for price action. He's not sitting here making bold predictions, but what this does show us is fascinating. From a purely historical standpoint for XRP specifically, we're not in some catastrophic position. It's just riding the wave with everything else in the market. Nothing's fundamentally broken at this stage. Moving on, Cryptos R Us posted a visual created by Glassnode, the on-chain data firm. What we're looking at here is their capitulation indicator compared against actual price. Red represents capitulation periods. That black line shows Bitcoin's real-time price. Here's what they noted. This metric has signaled previous bottoms. According to the Bitcoin price versus capitulation metric, crypto holders are capitulating. Capitulation equals mass emotion-driven selling by investors who are giving up and liquidating their assets at a loss to avoid further decline. This pattern has marked major bottoms in the past. So that's another angle to examine. When you apply the lens of history during similar moments of panic and surrender, we've consistently seen floors establish themselves in these areas. What typically unfolds after that? Upward movement returns. Maybe not instantly, maybe not this week or this month even, but the turnaround does arrive. We're talking about a bottom-forming territory, a zone where foundations get built. That's what this analysis is communicating. Finally, there's this post from chart analyst TechDev, shared it with his 559,000 followers over on X. And if you look at the chart, Bitcoin's trajectory is mapped along that upper line. All right, so peep this bottom line right here. This is your business cycle signal in action. Now, he laid it out like this. Top line is where the liquidity fuel has cyclically exhausted. It ends the red zone. All multi-year tops have printed here. Then flip it around. The bottom line, he says that's where the liquidity fuel has cyclically ignited. It begins the red zone. All multi-year parabolic moves have started here. Let me paint the picture for everyone staring at their screens right now. You see that upper dotted line sitting up top? That's been the kiss of death for liquidity throughout history. We've got receipts going back to 2014 on this thing. Now cruise your eyes down to this lower dotted line. That's where the magic happens. That's your ignition point. And here's what blows my mind. Every monster parabolic surge Bitcoin's ever had started right at that lower edge. Not most of them, not a few, all of them. Unless you're one of those, but wait, maybe things are different now, people. And hey, be my guest thinking that. What you're looking at is essentially a map of where we stand in the liquidity cycle. That's the whole story here. And at this very moment, we're camped out at the exact same ignition zone that's launched every massive Bitcoin explosion since day one of Bitcoin's existence. So this chart's really hammering home one message. We're sitting in pre-parabolic territory, not wandering through some bear market wasteland. Unless you've convinced yourself the rules changed. Personally, I'm not buying that for a second. Now, you might be wondering why I keep calling this a liquidity indicator when it's technically labeled as a business cycle signal. Fair question. Here's the deal. Yeah, it's measuring the business cycle, that part's legit, but the business cycle itself, that's basically dancing to liquidity's tune. Sure, you've got a handful of different metrics baked into how we measure business cycles, and trust me, I could spiral into the technical rabbit hole here, but I'll spare you in this video. But the connection between business cycles and liquidity is rock solid. And we're not just talking correlation here, we're talking cause and effect. So most people just swap business cycle for liquidity when they talk about this stuff, and it works. Just thought you should know there's that subtle distinction hanging out in the background. Okay, so the blockchain backer dropped this post, and can I just say, that guy's incredible. Just has this wholesome energy that makes you want to root for him. We're lucky to have someone like that representing the XRP community. Now, anyone who watches his stuff knows where he stands. His read is, we're drowning in bear market territory, or at minimum, we're driving straight toward one. From his angle, thinking we're about to pump, that's the long shot. I actually caught him using the exact word gamble in one of his breakdowns, calling it a way bigger gamble to expect prices climbing from here. My brain's wired differently on this one, and I want to unpack some extra reasoning behind my view. But yo, pause for a second, because I need to address something before the internet does its thing. Me disagreeing with what the blockchain backer's saying, some of you are already gearing up to make this into beef, which is precisely why I'm jumping ahead of it. That man is phenomenal. Top tier human being. Different perspectives don't create enemies, folks. Thinking that way is genuinely ridiculous. He's crushed calls that left other analysts looking silly. 0 people have a flawless track record. So I'm throwing my opinion into the ring here, and yeah, there's a legit chance I faceplant spectacularly. Could be totally off base, and then I'll be sitting here looking foolish. That outcome's definitely in play. But working through different viewpoints as a community, that's where the value lives. I just want to break down my reasoning and show you my cards. All right, so here's his post. 2 Bitcoin charts are staring back at you on the screen. So he threw this up just last night. Check the left side. That's Bitcoin's journey leading right up to this moment. Now swing your eyes to the right. That's Bitcoin back when 2021 was bleeding into 2022. He's connecting some dots between these two periods. Here's what he wrote. For a reference point of where Bitcoin is compared to past behavior, it has reached the 100-week moving average. Bitcoin has only come back to the 100-week moving average during bear markets. In 2014, 2018, and 2022, the 100-week moving average provided a period of temporary stability. Look, let me shoot straight with you. Everything he's laying out there, completely accurate. I'm not about to argue with facts. The blockchain backer caught Bitcoin tapping that 100-week moving average, confirmed. And the historical pattern he's pulling from? He's reading the data correctly. Yeah, that price level only showed up when bear markets were in full swing before. I'm not contesting any of that. Now, given that his whole position is we're either trapped in bear territory or about to crash into it, And he's been pretty loud about thinking that's the overwhelmingly probable path forward. Naturally, he's going to shine a spotlight on the data point that validates his case. Makes total sense from his perspective. But we can't just tunnel vision on one piece of evidence that confirms what we already think, right? Gotta look at everything on the table. Here's my situation though. I'm not a technical chart wizard, and honestly, trying to become one sounds like my personal hell. So instead, I follow a solid lineup of respected chart people, blockchain backers absolutely on that list, folks who've actually earned their stripes with consistently sharp calls. The blockchain backers in my rotation too. The whole strategy here is mixing up my sources so I'm not stuck in an echo chamber. That's how I've picked up on all these other metrics and data signals that actually matter. Now look, when you pull the camera back and scan the whole landscape, basically everything's screaming that we're dealing with a mid-cycle pullback, not the start of some fresh bear run. Want proof? ETF money is still pouring in. That just doesn't happen when markets are rolling over at the top. Get this though, we actually broke a record yesterday. You hear about that yet? Let me show you real quick. I've got another window open specifically for this. All right, peep this. Eric Balkunis dropped this data, and for those who don't know him, he's Bloomberg's senior ETF analyst. So the numbers on your screen right now came straight from him, and here's his exact words. Eruption in volume for the Bitcoin ETFs. All-time record set today with $11.5 billion as a group. IBIT was $8 billion of that, which was all-time record for it. Wild, but also normal whenever an ETF or category is going through it, volume is elevated. ETFs are liquidated release valves. What's your read on that? Bullish sign or red flag? Cryptos R Us jumped on this and reposted it with their commentary. You don't hit all-time high ETF volume in a dead market. Bitcoin is far from done. Sure, the day before was a bloodbath. Crypto took a beating. Honestly, the whole week's been pretty gnarly unless my timeline's getting scrambled here. Traditional markets and stocks got hammered too for most of the week. Hold on, let me reconstruct this properly. Friday bounced back green for equities. Yeah, that's clicking now. S&P 500 climbed, Russell 2000 pushed higher, NASDAQ 100 recovered, but everything before that? Ouch. There was one particularly nasty session. Wait, today's Saturday, so that would make it Thursday probably. Yeah, Thursday. That was when things really got crushed. But here's what really stands out. Even with that nasty day, we're not watching everyone rush for the exits in panic mode. And trust me, it was nasty. That single session might have clocked in as the biggest Bitcoin ETF dump day we've ever recorded. Just another clue in the detective work, right? I'd say that checks out. Now let me throw something else at you. Have funding rates crashed into deeply negative territory? Because that detail actually carries weight. If this were truly the opening act of a bear market, futures funding would have nosedived way below zero by this point. That pattern shows up like clockwork at genuine market peaks. Here's the dynamic. Short sellers flood in so aggressively that they're literally bleeding money hour after hour just to maintain those positions. And that negative funding, it stays pinned down there for extended periods. But we're not living in that reality right now. Yeah, funding took a hit during the sell-off, no question. But it never plunged into those brutal, unrelenting negative zones we watched unfold during actual bear transitions. Remember 2014? Or 2018? How about 2022? That kind of sustained pressure just isn't showing up. The reason's pretty clear. Market participants aren't stacking chips like the bears waking up. Not even close. The positioning tells a completely different story. This funding pattern screams mid-cycle shakeout, not the beginning of some grinding multi-year slog downward. With crypto specifically, bear phases typically run around 12 months, give or take. Though historically, you're often dealing with a couple years where the vibes are just rough all around, you know? So yeah, could stretch longer. Point being, there's an absolute mountain of other data I'm digging through. My goal is finding what's real, which means I'm bouncing between tons of different analysts. What's jumping out at me is this massive stack of signals all screaming mid-cycle pullback, while the bear market evidence, basically non-existent. That's my honest read right now. And those heavyweight cycle top indicators everyone watches, still silent. Every single one. Think about what that means. We're in completely uncharted waters compared to 2014, 2018, or 2022. Totally different ballgame. So CoinMarketCap actually maintains this tracker. You might want to save that link, by the way. There's this whole dashboard dedicated to crypto market cycle indicators. They're monitoring 30 different signals. Want to know how many are firing off warnings right now? A big fat 0. None. Which raises an interesting question. Did these things just malfunction? Because they nailed every previous top without fail. Have these tools suddenly gone haywire? If so, where's the theory explaining why? What changed in the market structure that would make them obsolete? What broke the mechanism? I'm genuinely asking because nobody's given me a solid answer on this yet. Then you've got the macro environment sitting there like a 500-pound gorilla, which could arguably be the most critical piece of this entire puzzle. This is why I'm always preaching that chart gazing alone won't cut it. You need this context baked into your analysis before you lock in any firm conviction about our position in the cycle. Let me tell you what's got my attention. Global liquidity. This is hands down one of the biggest clues telling me we're not even close to wrapping this up. We've got plenty of road ahead. Some folks might argue we're past the peak, and fine, whatever terminology you prefer. But when someone throws around mid-cycle correction, all they're really saying is, yeah, we took a hit, but this ride keeps going. There's more upside coming. That's my whole point here. And global M2 is climbing right now, like undeniably climbing. Central banks around the world are hitting the easy button. Rate cuts are dropping left and right across the globe, not just on our side of the pond. What happens in December? Your guess is as good as mine. Maybe they pause, maybe they don't, but we've already locked in 2 cuts. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. Now here's where it gets interesting. Bitcoin has literally never peaked while global liquidity is on the rise. 0 times. Every major crash happened when the money supply was shrinking, not expanding. So liquidity accelerating like this, that's actually the exact opposite signal of what you'd see before a bear market. This is the kind of backdrop that typically ignites those insane parabolic moves at the cycle's peak. Look, anyone can cherry pick data to sound bearish, but here's my honest take, and obviously everyone's entitled to their view on this. I'm just laying out where I genuinely stand. If you line up the metrics that actually matter and rank them by importance, especially the liquidity picture, it's pretty overwhelming. This bull market isn't finished. Sometimes I'll get it wrong, no question, but this is my real opinion. If it turns out I'm off, then I'm off. But right now, this is what makes sense to me. And sure, we might just chop around sideways for a stretch. So think about global liquidity for a second. And assuming Raoul Paul's onto something here, we've probably got some obstacles coming our way. And that includes what's brewing in traditional markets too. But here's what's been rattling around in my head. What if Raoul Paul nails this call? Let's say we see a massive surge somewhere around the middle of 2026, maybe earlier, maybe later. Will people suddenly flip the script and go, ha, told you it was a bear market before we rocketed? I'm seriously wondering about this because where do we even draw the line on what qualifies as a bear market? When I say those words, I'm picturing what you're probably picturing too. The real deal. The brutal crypto winter where Bitcoin gets absolutely demolished. 70%, 80%, whatever the carnage ends up being. Then comes that wild, euphoric finale, and everything implodes. Suddenly, everyone's writing obituaries for crypto, declaring it's done, finished, game over. That's the kind of destruction I'm talking about, not this current dip we're navigating. Here's a crazy stat. Going back to 2017, we've seen about 24 drops of 25% or steeper, and every time, without fail, people screamed it was the end. So my bet? This is just another one of those moments. Out of roughly 24 pullbacks since 2017, only 2 actually signaled we were entering a real bear market. Just 2. So I don't think this is going to be the 3rd strike. And hey, maybe I'll eat my words here. You can check out what blockchain backer charted, and just to be clear, he's working with hard facts. His post is solid. I'm not disputing a single thing he's saying. But you're probably thinking, hold on, why would the 100-week moving average get tapped if we're not actually in a bear market? Great question, and I'm genuinely glad you brought that up, viewer. Seriously, I love when people think critically about this stuff. Here's what's really going on. This wasn't your typical fear-driven sell-off where retail traders freak out and dump everything. We're witnessing something way more mechanical. A distressed market maker hemorrhaging coins at the exact same time every single day, with enormous over-the-counter transactions that never even show up on public order books. By the way, I actually recorded a whole deep dive on this topic super recently. What was it, yesterday? Day before? Doesn't matter, it was long though. I broke down all the evidence explaining exactly why this is unfolding the way it is and why the puzzle pieces fit together so cleanly. We're dealing with forced liquidations here. This traces directly back to that massive October 10th unwinding event. And when you look at how everything's timed out, man, it's almost textbook. The correlation is spot on. This type of mechanical forced dumping can absolutely trick traditional bear market indicators into flashing red, even while the underlying market architecture isn't screaming cycle top at all. So sure, his metric is showing real data. Nobody's disputing the numbers. But why those numbers are appearing is a totally different story this time around. We're looking at a false signal caused by a singular liquidity squeeze, not confirmation that the party's over. At least that's my read on it. Could I be mistaken? Absolutely. I've gotten things wrong before, including calls that really mattered. None of us bat 1,000. Blockchain backer might have this one figured out perfectly, and if that's how it plays out, I'll be first in line to give credit where it's earned. His analysis could prove spot on. It genuinely could. And you know what else? If he does turn out to be correct, I'm giving him double credit because he leaned bearish before the crowd started piling on that narrative. That kind of contrarian positioning actually deserves serious recognition. Everyone and their grandmother is calling for lower prices. But here's the thing. When he first started waving red flags and saying, guys, I'm noticing some seriously sketchy patterns in these charts, most people thought he was crazy. The bullish echo chamber was loud back then. So regardless of what happens next, he earned his stripes with that call. That wasn't easy when euphoria was peaking. Fast forward to today, bearish takes get applause and retweets. He stuck his neck out when optimism was the only acceptable opinion. That kind of timing matters, and I respect it, whether he nails the final outcome or not. We'll find out soon enough. Anyway, there's my 2 cents on all this. Now comes the fun part, where you tear me apart in the comments and school me on everything I missed. Honestly, that's the whole point of the internet, arguing with strangers. So hit me with your perspective. And real talk, underneath all the disagreement, we're actually cheering for the same team. We all want XRP to absolutely explode upward. We're all hoping crypto rips higher across the board. Blockchain backer wants that exact same thing, no question. He's just calling it like he sees it with zero sugarcoating. That's really all any of us can offer. That's what I'm trying to do too. My gut says bull market right now. But am I married to that view? Not even close. If the dominoes start falling and we get clear cycle top signals across the board, I'll pivot fast. If Bitcoin tanks and breaks through the key structural floors that several respected technical analysts I follow consider non-negotiable, yeah, that's going to change my tune real quick. Like in yesterday's video, I showed you multiple analysts pointing at that $74,000 zone on Bitcoin as absolutely essential for the bullish framework to stay intact. That level cracks? All right, I'm paying attention. I can be convinced. There are tons of developments that would flip my perspective. But hold up, I'm not a financial advisor. Never buy or sell anything based on my opinions or content. That would be a spectacularly terrible decision. See you in the next video.